point of view of that nation. That's not to say what's in the best interest of that nation. You're going to get what the leaders of that nation have decided you're going to get. Usually that's the State Department, which means usually it's the president. And in our case, with Russia, that is exactly what we are getting. Russia is saying that their ruble troubles are not because of the American sanctions. And I believe, for the most part, that they are correct, that Putin is right, that these economic troubles are not from sanctions. I firmly believe that, looking at what's going on in their economy. What I do believe is that gas prices have been the single biggest factor in Russian currency taking a nosedive. And that's because gas prices, the barrel of oil is just so much lower than it was, just a couple months ago, for example. Gas is now almost, it's hovering at $2 a gallon. That's crazy. We were in the threes, the mid threes not too long ago. And now we're at, $2.15 here in Texas in some places. In Oklahoma, they've seen under $2 in one place. So, it's this fantastic thing, that free market reaction that has strongly benefited Americans, shoppers, consumers. And that dip in the price of oil has hurt Russia significantly because Russia's economy is not very diverse. Like Texas, the most that they do is sell oil and other natural gases, fossil fuels. And so Russia's economy has taken a big hit from that. And Russia, in response, has done what it can government-wise to try and stem the flow, if you will, to try and bolster the rupee so that people will continue investing in it. Rather than, some people think that Russia may default on its debt like it did in the past. That's basically how the Soviet Union fell. They had to default on their debt. And so some people think it may happen again. Some people think the rupee is on the verge of collapse. The Russian bank spiked its interest rates to try and get their currency under control. But, it is what it is. And it is, in fact, oil. And no matter what that government does, no matter what fake precautions they take to try and change the appearance of an economy is what it is. You cannot trick it. You can trick the people working within it, but you cannot trick the economy itself. That's how you create bubbles, like the housing one that collapsed. So Russia does this really fantastic media day every year, where Putin comes out and fields all sorts of questions and gives a speech and all sorts of stuff. But he stands up and he takes a whole bunch of questions from the media and even from, average people. And last year, I believe, that included a question from Edward Snowden, for example, who'd been allowed, political asylum. And Putin came out and said that the NSA spying against Americans and the rest of the world is wrong and that he wouldn't do that. And so, even Putin was like, hey, Obama, that's a jerk move. Don't do that. It's pretty messed up. He could have been full of it, but, at least he got to take the high ground rhetorically. But in today's / yesterday's on Russian time press conference, he addressed several things specifically that many of you poliophiles, you political buffs, may have noticed, may have mentioned, may have talked about. And that is the fact that Russia has been flying nuclear-armed aircraft into or near American airspace. I know a lot of people have posted stuff on social media about it, concerned, what's Putin up to? He got Crimea, and now he's trying to, expand out more and take over the world, and he's trying to reunite the Soviet Union, and blah, 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 blah. In reality, and this is why I like Putin as a leader, because when he comes out and he makes an argument, he doesn't try to dance around words or issues. He just comes out and flat out calls out and just demolishes the argument. He's like a verbal bulldozer. He came out today and he said Americans have been flying nuclear-armed aircraft around Russia since before the end of the Cold War and have never once stopped. We only started these flights up again a few years ago, and we're the ones being aggressive. And not only that, he said that Russia spends under $60 billion a year on its Defense Department, whereas the United States spends about $500 billion. So 10 times the amount of money we spend on defense compared to Russia. And we're accusing Russia of being aggressors. That does not make sense. And I gotta say, Putin's got a point. Whereas we may not be sending secret submarines anywhere, but otherwise, we're on the same boat for the most part. A lot of people are taking issue with Russia sending weapons to the rebels in Ukraine. And Obama and the EU have come out and condemned it, and that happened. But when you look at the fact that the United States is sending weapons to, rebels and betting against Syria, which is allied with Russia, or at least friendly with Russia, you can't help but kind of cock your head a little bit, because America's got no high ground to stand on when we're doing the same exact thing in the Middle East. They're just doing it, close to home. I mean, could you imagine if Mexico, which works really closely with us, decided to favor another country from far away? Let's say Mexico started to favor Brazil and was helping Brazilian interests and not allowing American interests to flourish. America would so quickly get on top of that and make sure that they stopped whatever shenanigans that president or Congress at the time thought they were pulling, and that would be the end of it. But Russia does it, and America comes out and condemns it and talks about needing to ramp up defense and NATO action and brings in new allies and deploys more troops and all kinds of craziness. But I think it's important to at least listen to Russia's side of it. Now, I'm not going to come out and say Vladimir Putin's a good guy. You'd never hear me say that. I respect the guy for being a straight shooter. You could be the biggest jerk on the planet. If you tell people things straight to their face without any side, like speaking at the side of your mouth, double talk, then I have some respect for you. And Putin, he doesn't have a need. He doesn't gain anything from some of the side talk stuff that he gets accused of. And I think, it's important to listen to what he had to say in the press conference, at least so you understand the other side of the argument. Because in reality, if you're just going to blindly listen to the State Department, then you can't criticize the Obama administration for anything, because you're not paying attention enough to make that call. You're not looking at the entire picture. So you're not informed enough to make a decision. And obviously I don't speak Russian, and obviously you don't speak Russian, so it doesn't make sense for me to sit here and play sound bites with, and it wouldn't do any good. It's a terrible Russian impression, but whatever. So you just have to take my word for it. You can Google everything he said. But as far as America is concerned, he came out today and was saying the sanctions are not what's causing our economy to get messed up. It's getting messed up because of oil. The problem is our economy is not diverse enough. We have too much of our economy put in oil and natural gas. We need to diversify our economy. We need to get new businesses, new industries. That is what Putin said today. That is exactly what's happening with the economy. That is exactly what's happening. When you look at what's going on in the world economy, and you're like, Russia's not doing too hot. Oh, I know why. It's because all they have is oil. I mean, it's so painfully obvious. And so when you hear things from the Obama administration or other people that are like, oh, our sanctions are working and we've got to keep punishing the Russians for their unacceptable behavior. And you're like, well, really, though, Russia just has too much of its economy in oil. It's kind of like Texas. The Texas economy is going to see a drop because of the price of oil going down. So really, you're full of crap. And so I just think it's important for you folks, because you know you're going to hear about squirrely old Vlad. You're going to hear about how terrible he is and how the sanctions are working and Obama's doing well and blah, 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 blah. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all. Sanctions only hurt other countries. Sanctions only hurt Americans. And they don't hurt the governments. They only hurt the regular average people. And not only that, they're misguided. It's an ineffective tool that's misguided in its use and serves no purpose whatsoever, except to inflict pain on the citizens of another country. And that makes no sense. None whatsoever. All you do is incite animosity and unite the people behind Vladimir Putin. And you hurt the chances of your good ideas reaching said people, because you are alienating an entire country. There's a reason why Vladimir Putin has an 80% approval rating. And it's, I think, in part due to the fact that he's standing up to America. Russians are tired of being pushed around. Who can blame him? Who can blame the Russians? I'm sure there's people who can try, but not using any logic that works. Let me tell you. I think that Vladimir Putin is probably a guy I would want to drink a beer with. I would love to drink a beer with Vladimir Putin. And honestly, I don't think he's that terrible of a world leader. And I think that the Obama administration and the way that they've addressed this with Crimea, without hard evidence, it speaks to ignorance. And the fact that they're putting sanctions on people, that's out of ignorance. They're hurting trade all over the world in the name of looking strong. And the same thing goes with Cuba. Those Cuban cigars not allowed to be imported, people not being allowed to travel to Cuba, all of the embargoes against that country, all that they've done is created several generations of extreme poverty and prevented any chance of capitalism and democracy and freedom in general taking root and growing. And it's the same thing with Russia. When we put sanctions on them, when we call them out for stuff that's ridiculous and not even remotely feasible, all we do is look like jerks. All we do is make ourselves look bad, when what we ought to be doing is trying to spread our ideas. Because, folks, if your ideas are good, people will follow them because they want to. Any idea that you've got to force someone to follow is not a good idea. Any policy that a country is trying to force other countries to follow is not a good policy. And any country that wants to force other countries to do what's beneficial for them rather than themselves, well, that's not very just either. It's not morally right, and it's unacceptable. Alright, ladies and gents, I hope you've had a good week. You can find me, of course, at the page, facebook.com/AmericaOurWay. Find me on the Twitters, @AmericaOurWay. You, ladies and gentlemen, are listening to me, Dustin Hoyt, on Vigilant Liberty Radio. And I hope we will see you next time. Have a good week.